Hi, this is Mike Malidi, Wine Guardian Division Manager. Today we're going to talk about our through-the-wall units, and we brought in one of our TTW 018 systems to discuss and go over today. What we'll do is we'll look at the features of the unit, how it works, how it's installed, and then some of the options, and then we'll open it up to some questions that may have come about through the talk. So. The system right here is a little bit different than what we have originally designed and come up with for cooling units. Wine Guardian started the business developing ducted solutions for wine cellar cooling. We eventually got to the point where we decided to manufacture a through-the-wall unit. So those of you that aren't familiar with through-the-wall units, the way that they work is they physically mount through the wall of the wine cellar. Generally, the warm air there consists of a cold air side and a warm air side. The warm air side would typically vent to an indoor space, and that's exactly how our systems are designed. It is a self-contained unit by all means, and what that means is all of the mechanicals are in one device. So you'll have your compressor, you'll have your condenser coil, you'll have your evaporator coil, you'll have evaporator fan, condenser fan, and all of your controls in one device. So there's no auxiliary equipment outside of the building, outside of the structure that you have to tie into. It's all right here in one package. So the way that this works, if you were to look at the system, is this is basically cut in half. If you were to take this top shell off, you would see a divider wall here, which divides the two sections of the unit. All right. Our systems, with our systems, we have two distinct sizes. We have a TTW 009. Which is rated for about 1100 BTUs per hour. And we also have a TTW 018, which is rated for about 2100 BTUs per hour. The systems in themselves are exactly the same. They're exactly the same size. They're configured exactly the same. So the only way that you can tell the two systems apart is by the model number of the system that you have in front of you. Everything else is exactly the same. Size-wise, the units themselves are exactly 25 inches long from faceplate to faceplate. They're designed to fit within a standard stud width. So this will fit in a 14.5-inch wide opening, and the height is roughly about 16 inches. And we designed it to as a replacement for most of our competitors' units, so it should just fit right into the openings that our competitors have if you were to replace one of their systems. Some of the features of the unit. It's a commercial grade device. All of the components that are inside of the unit are commercial grade. Compressors, coils, aluminum coils, so they're assured that it won't corrode. Aluminum body of the system. The chassis has an aluminum cover to it, so that will not corrode. The base pan itself is a ABS plastic material. So you're assured that that will not corrode over time. The system is serviceable in the field, so you do not have to remove it from the wall and send it back to us for rework and send it back to you. Everything is serviceable in the field, which makes it a commercial grade product. Some of the other features of the unit include a decorative faceplate grill, which you see here on the front of the system. This is actually the side of the unit that you would see inside the wine cellar. We have the exact same grill on the condenser side of the unit, or the warm air side of the unit. So they look equally as nice inside the wine cellar as it does outside of the wine cellar. The controls for the unit are all centrally located right here on the front face of the system. So this is where you will display your temperature and humidity, where you can adjust your temperature and also control your humidity if you had one of our optional humidifiers. This is where you might see any alarms. All of the functioning of the system itself happens right here at the main control panel on the system. You usually want to have this accessible to you so you can see what's going on with the unit and your room. You don't want to install the unit in an area where you can't see the control panel or it's difficult to access. Maybe it's too high in the room or over in a corner. You want to be able to see what's happening in the area and in the wine room itself. So this is the area that you're going to view to determine what the temperature and humidity is of the space. The unit itself comes with our easy mount sleeve, which is required for installation. It also comes with 7 feet of clear plastic tubing for connection of the drain system. The system itself has an onboard condensate removal system, which is always boiling off any condensation that's generated from the cooling process. But in case there is an overflow situation where it just can't keep up, that hose is supplied, so you can take that away to an open floor drain or a condensate pump or just away from the unit. In addition to that, we ship it with our quick start manual, which gives clear directions on the installation of the device. And there's also our full version manual that's located on our website for your review. It gives a little bit more detail on proper wine room construction, some more details on the setup of the controls, changing power cord locations, etc. So it makes sense to review that manual if you can. All right. Let's talk about the installation of the unit. The system comes with an easy mount sleeve, and the way that this works is you're going to create a hole in the wall that you plan to place the unit through, hence through the wall system. It needs to go through the wall of your wine cellar. What we've done is we've provided our easy mount sleeve to help with that function. So you've created a hole in the wall of your wine room. Essentially, this sleeve goes through that wall, and then you can attach to the stud locations here at 4 points on the sleeve. You want to make sure that this is level and plumb, but these are the attachment points. Once this is done, the unit essentially slides through that sleeve to any desired length that you'd like, whether you want it flush with the racking in your wine room or maybe flush with the wall in your wine cellar, or you could have it flush on the condenser side. So you can essentially move this unit all along its length on the sleeve until it meets your requirements for mounting. Once the system is set where you'd like it, we require that you caulk the joint between the sleeve itself and the unit, so that we create an airtight package, an airtight system basically between the sleeve and your outdoor or your other room environment. We want to make sure that that wine room is sealed up completely. The way that the system works once it's installed is the decorative grill here serves a purpose of bringing in air to the wine cellar cooling unit from the sides and the bottom of the unit. So return air from the wine room is coming into the unit from these areas, is drawn across the cooling coil, and then is blown out of this top section. So within your wine room, you want to make sure that this area is free. You want to give it enough room to breathe. It's not generally acceptable to put this in a corner of your space where it may be hitting another wall. You want to have it out in the open so that it can blow that cold air out into the space. Similarly, on the condenser side, the same holds true. We're bringing in air into the sides and bottom of the grill, and then on the condenser side, it's actually blowing hot air out into your finished living room, finished basement space, or a mechanical room, crawl space, what have you. So the wine room side is blowing cold air out, the condenser side is blowing hot air out. As part of that cold air moving out or blowing out into the wine room, we'll take this front cover off and you can see a little bit better, but there are two turning vanes inside this section. Those vanes allow you to adjust how you want that air to exit out into your wine space. Maybe you do have this mounted over to one side of a wall. It might be advantageous to adjust those turning vanes so cold air is actually blowing out into the center of the wine room. Gives the flexibility to do that with the device. No others have that ability to do it. So that's ideal for proper airflow into the space. The controls, as I mentioned, are all centrally located here. You want to be able to view those controls. We typically recommend that the unit be positioned on a wall maybe 5 to 6 feet up, so you can reach the controls and you can view them. They are always going to give you a temperature readout and a humidity readout into the space, and it will alarm you if the conditions are out of preset values. On the condenser end of the unit, it's important to understand where this unit will be venting into. I mentioned a finished basement or a mechanical room or crawl space. You really should understand how much room you have available for venting and the conditions of that space in which you're venting into. This device is designed to be mounted indoors generally, so maximum and minimum conditions for this mounting area are anywhere from a low of 50 degrees Fahrenheit. This will actually handle up to 115 degrees Fahrenheit, but we recommend 90 to 95 degrees as an optimal condition where this unit can be mounted and successfully keep your wine cellar cool. The venting area has to be able to breathe. You can't just put this in a closet with no airflow surrounding it or ability to bring in air to this unit and expect it to work. It will not happen and will not work efficiently, and you'll end up with problems. We recommend that the venting area be at least 2.5 to 3 times the size of your wine cellar for proper operation, proper heat dissipation out into the space. Having said that, we have had units mounted in closets or very small areas, but the venting is accommodated by exhausting the hot air out or by bringing fresh air into that space so the unit can effectively breathe on the condenser side. So you should be aware of how this is being mounted and how the condenser side is going to breathe. Through the wall units, as with all of our wine cellar cooling units, it's important to determine the size of the unit by performing a heat load calculation. Of all of the systems are through the wall units, people tend to use the cubic foot method to determine the size of the correct through the wall unit for the space. It can get you into trouble because all wine rooms are created differently. Some have more glass than others, some have more insulation than others, some are commercial space. You really need to do a heat load calculation to determine the correct through the wall cooling system that is required for the space. We've seen many applications where the unit is just not keeping up with the heat load of the space because they sized it incorrectly. So please do a heat load calculation when determining not only through the walls but all of our cooling unit applications. As far as some of the options that are available on the system. We're the only wine cellar cooling unit that offers a through-the-wall with a heater option, and it's ETL labeled. One thing that we didn't mention, one of the features, is that this unit has an ETL rating, so it's agency approved. With that is a heater option. It's a 500 watt heater option, and similar to all of our ducted units, that heater acts to warm up the wine room. Say you've got a wine room that has 3 outside walls in an area that's extremely cold in the wintertime. That heater will make sure that it doesn't get too cold in the wine space. It actually heats the air up back into the wine room. So it's either heating or cooling, but not both. One of the other options is the use of our standalone humidifier. The standalone humidifier actually gets all of its control and all of its power through this device. When we take the front and back covers off, we'll show you where the connection to the humidifier is located. Essentially, it plugs into the through-the-wall unit. All the control for the humidity is right here at the front of the system, as we mentioned. That is a separate piece, a separate device that mounts inside the wine cellar, and that adds moisture to the wine cellar space. So that's another option. It's our standalone Wine Guardian humidifier. We also have a serving temperature option, as we do with all of our wine cellar cooling units. The serving temperature option allows this unit to operate at colder conditions, allows you to control your wine cellar to maybe in the mid-40s. Again, you have to run a heat load calculation to make sure that that is entirely possible. We have enough cooling capacity to get that cabinet or very small wine room down to the mid-40 range. But the through-the-wall can do that, and that serving temperature option is available. One of the other things that we have, one of the other options that we have available for the through-the-wall is our remote interface controllers. Again, we'll show you where those plug in, but you can add on one of our remote interface controllers and place it either inside the wine room or maybe outside of the wine room to give you an indication of the temperature and humidity of the space. So you don't always have to go into the wine room to see what's going on, to see what your temp and humidity is. You can have that right outside of the door or maybe in an office or another part of the home and view what the conditions are. We can also connect it to our remote sensors. You can have up to 3 remote sensors in the wine cellar, all connected back to the through-the-wall, which allows you to sense different locations and average their conditions, so better control of the space. We also have duct collar connections for the ends of our through-the-wall. These are factory-applied connections. This gives you an example of one of the connections that we manufacture. We have 2 versions. This is what we call a side outlet and intake version. So it allows you to connect ductwork up to the supply here at this side, return over here at this side. We also have a version that has the connections out the face of this unit. This particular version, these are 4-inch round or 4-inch oval connections. On the face version, those are 6-inch round and 6-inch oval versions. But what this does, essentially, it allows you to connect up ductwork and connect ductwork to either face, either the condenser side or the evaporator side of the system, and connect ductwork up to it. So if you had a small cabinet that you were trying to cool, these are ideal for that type of application. Maybe you put this on top of the cabinet, you have this ductwork connected, this ductwork faceplate connected at the factory, and now you can connect supply and return ductwork for a relatively short distance over to the top of the cabinet. We've had applications where this type of duct connection was connected to the condenser side, and the whole unit was placed inside the wine cellar, and they're just ducting in and out the condenser air. So that it offers up some flexibility to the mounting of the unit. It also gives you the ability to connect these units up to small cabinets and maybe hide the device above the cabinet or below the cabinet. So it opens up some flexibility as far as how you apply the through-the-wall unit. Now, instead of just being purely a through-the-wall device, you've opened it up to be a ductable solution for small environments. That, coupled with our serving temperature, may offer a nice solution for colder or wine cabinets that you want to maintain colder temperatures at. We've had a lot of applications where we've connected up the duct collars and we've got the serving temperature option. We're controlling into low to mid 40 range for maybe white wine storage or a serving temperature application scenario in a restaurant or a home. One other thing I want to point out with regards to the duct collar connections, these are to be used with a limited amount of duct work. Probably a maximum of 12 to 15 feet of duct work is allowed on these types of connections. The fans inside the unit just don't have the capacity to move air through a lot of ductwork. So just be careful how much ductwork you're putting on the ductable connections that we offer. One other optional piece of equipment that we have is a duct collar connection that mounts directly to or in place of the perforated grill that we have on the faceplate. That duct collar connection is typically mounted on the condenser side and acts to have the ability to duct that warm air away from the space. Maybe you've got the cooling unit mounted in an area where it's venting into a small area, or it's adding too much heat to a mechanical room or a family space. That duct collar makes it so you can connect 6-inch round flexible duct up to the exhaust portion and then take that hot air and either move it to another part of the house or exhaust it completely out of the structure. So it's an ideal option for those areas where you just need to get rid of that heat somehow. So keep that in mind for when you're applying the systems. So as far as moving air, we've got a couple scenarios. We've got our intake and supply duct connections that are factory mounted, or the plastic duct collar that can be mounted in the field to the faceplate if you need to exhaust that hot air out. So what we'll do now is we'll take the front cover off here and take a look at a couple of the internals to the device. There's 2 screws on the bottom of the unit that hold the front cover on. So essentially you're going to remove those 2 screws and simply pull out and then down to remove the face plates. Okay? Simple as that. And once you do that, it will open up the internal, at least this is the cooling side of the wine cellar cooling unit. And what we'll do is we'll zoom into some of the features that are on this side that I pointed out to earlier in the video. So we've taken the front cover off. You can kind of see the internals behind that cover. You've got your cooling coil. All of the air, as I mentioned, comes into the faceplate, goes across the coil, through a fan, and then it dumps out into this section. You see the turning vanes that I had mentioned previously in the video. You can take this front cover off and you can adjust these vanes so you can direct the air where you want it to go inside the wine room. It's a neat feature that no other wine cellar cooling unit manufacturer has of through-the-wall systems. It gives you some directional airflow to the cooling air of the space. One other feature here that you'll notice is the humidifier connection. There's a little white, what's called a Molex connection here on the side of this control panel. This is where if you had an optional Wine Guardian standalone humidifier where you'd plug in the power and control cable to. And then this goes out to your remote humidifier and all the control ends up being at this device. So you'd set your adjustments here for what humidity level that you wanted, and this also powers that humidifier, so you don't have to have a separate power cord connection for that device. It's all controlled right here at this main control. This particular unit, we've moved the power cord to the front of the unit. This certainly, this is for this particular case. It normally ships on the condenser end, and it's a very simple changeover that's pointed out in our operations manual. One thing to also point out, looking at the back of this grill, I don't know if you can you see this okay, is the way that this grill is designed, it provides a separation between the return air and the supply air. There's this divider piece here as part of this grill assembly. It's imperative that you're using our grill assemblies and you don't remove them when you're doing an install. The unit will not operate correctly without this faceplate installed. So we'll move around to the condenser side and we'll point out a few of the features of that side of the unit. So we flip the unit around, and now this is the condenser side of the system. This is the warm air section. So air from the maybe a mechanical room, living space, the warm air side of the system is going to come into the intake of the grill, go across the condenser coil, and then hot air is going to exhaust out the top surface here. A couple things to point out on this section is this is where the drain overflow is at the bottom of the unit. So you can see we've got a cap on it right here, and it usually ships from our factory open. So you'll have an open tube coming out of the bottom of the unit, and we ship to you this cap as a separate piece that can be added if you find that you're not getting any moisture out of the system, that it's not draining, and that you've got no extra condensation issues. So that you can be placed on that overflow drain. In addition to that, at the very bottom underneath this control panel here, there's a electrical connection for plug-in of our auxiliary controls. If you had a remote sensor or our remote thermostat, what we call our remote interface controller, this is where you'd make that connection. This is where you'd plug that in and then wire that out to wherever you wanted to mount those remote sensors or remote thermostat. In addition to those connections, just one thing to point out: on the back of our faceplates, you'll have your serial plate, which will give you all the pertinent electrical information, the serial number, the part number, all of the amp draws, and so forth. So if you need that information, it's on the back of the cover plate. One other key element to the condenser side is the power cord placement switch. As I mentioned, it comes standard equipment on the condenser or warm air section of the unit. In order to move it to the front of the unit or the wine room side, you have to flip this red switch here to move the power from the condenser side to the wine room side. So it's a matter of moving the switch over. You can see I just did it there, and back to the other side of the unit. So that's a requirement for you to move power from one end of the unit to the other end. So that's a general overview of the through-the-wall unit and how it works and how it operates. So we'll open it up to any questions now.
How do I adjust how far out into the wine room the unit will sit? And what's the minimum distance?
Essentially, you have the ability to adjust the length or where this unit is mounted inside the wine cellar by moving it along the length of the unit through the easy mount installation sleeve. So you could make it flush with the wine cellar side, or you can make it flush with the warm air side of the unit. Now understand that depending on which side of the system you want flush, you're going to have to move this easy mount sleeve around, so the flange is on the flush side. So you can see the flange around this easy mount sleeve. This is essentially where the flange would be mounted if this were a flush side application. If you wanted it flush on the wine room side, flip this around so the flange is on your wine room side. And then you can adjust how you place the wine cooling unit through the sleeve.
Can the whole unit sit inside the room?
Generally, most of the time, the wine cellar cooling unit, because it's a through the wall, goes through the wall of the wine cellar. You can mount the whole device inside the wine room, but you have to have an intake and exhaust on the condenser side of the unit. That's the only way that the system will work. And you also have to accommodate for the size of the unit. So you have to have enough space to accommodate the 25 by 16, roughly 16 and a half inch, roughly size of the unit. So as long as you can accommodate that and you can bring in air and exhaust air out of the wine room using one of our duct collar connections, you can do that. You also have to take into account where you're getting that air from. It can't be too hot, it can't be too cold. You have to stay within the maximum and minimum conditions that we set forth for proper operation of our through-the-wall unit.
Do you recommend we attach a drain to the unit?
That's a good question. What we recommend is that upon initial startup, you turn the system on, connect up a drain to the unit. We provide with plastic drain hose. Connect up a drain, maybe bring it to a bucket, bring that drain to a bucket, and let it operate for maybe a week or two to see how it functions. Are you getting any condensate out of the unit? Maybe you run a little bit longer than that, depending on the time of the year that you're starting up your wine cellar and the humidity levels you're starting within the space, just to see how the unit is operating and if that condensate removal system has the ability to keep up with it. It's always a good safety measure to connect up a drain to the unit and take it away to an open floor drain or condensate pump as a permanent solution. That's always a good idea, but if you don't have the capabilities to do that, or it's very difficult for your room or application, then you may want to see if you'll have condensate removal issues up front, and then take care of it after that.
Does the through-the-wall unit add humidity to the room?
No, it doesn't. The through-the-wall unit is a cooling device only, and it's designed to maintain the humidity levels in the space anywhere from 50% RH up to 65% RH as far as its normal refrigeration cycle. So if your starting point for humidity is in that range, it should continue to maintain that level of humidity in the space. If you're lower than that and you're requesting or you're requiring that humidity level, which you should, be above 50% RH, this device does not have the ability to add that moisture back into the environment. You would need one of our standalone humidifiers to take care of that function, to add that humidity. And as I mentioned, that is all controlled through the main control panel of our device if you chose to add a humidifier.
Can it be mounted near the floor?
Generally, we don't like to see that application. Floor placement or low on a wall is not a good area or a proper area to mount a through the wall unit. One, typically hot air rises, so you tend to generally have a colder room at the lower parts of your structure. You like to mount the unit 5 to 6 feet off the floor, someplace where you can view the controls, you can access the controls. This gives you a better mix of warm and cold air throughout the space, and is a better operating system. So to answer your question, I would strongly suggest against that and try to move it up on the wall to the midpoint or a little bit higher than that. Same goes true for a very high mount of the unit. You don't want it right at the ceiling level. You want to be off the ceiling a bit so that that cold air can really come off the unit and be directed into the center part of the room, so it mixes well and then can return back.